Most executives I speak to think that taking a price rise should be fairly straightforward. Costs go up, prices go up. Simple, right? But inside most organizations, things don't work as smoothly when it comes to price rises. So here's a simple question. When your organization takes a price rise, who actually manages it and what's the process? Is it finance, sales, marketing? Or does it depend on, a particular person or a certain situation? In many organizations, that question really doesn't have a clear answer. Hello, I'm Joanna Wells. I'm the founder of Taylor Wells Advisory, and we focus specifically on improving margin through pricing strategy. In this podcast, I'd like to share some of my experiences of working with companies on pricing strategy, what tends to work with a price rise, and what often makes price rises really far more difficult than they need to be. Now, over the past few years, we've all seen a lot of cost pressure and disruption. There's been supply chain issues, commodity price increases, fluctuations, lots and lots of inflation, global instability, wars, political tensions, you name it. For many companies, that's meant, you've got to really move quickly with costs to cover your margin. And that's usually when organizations realize how difficult pricing actually can be. From the outside looking in, pricing looks simple. I've actually had someone say to me, how difficult can it be? You just add, 5 to 10% on costs. Right, give that a go. But inside the organization, when you're actually doing it and you want to do it well, you realize calculating prices, planning a price rise, changing prices in a system, it really does affect almost everything in an organization and almost every team, from finance, sales, marketing, operations, IT. And if these teams aren't aligned, things really start to become complicated. And often, from my experience, the problem really starts with something quite simple, really basic, and it's about ownership. Inside most companies, no one really owns pricing. Yeah, people might put their hand up and say, I'll do a bit of pricing. Yeah, I'll help you out. I'll change those prices in the system. But no one really is accountable for pricing. I've even seen pricing teams that say, I'm not accountable for pricing. So, okay, if you've got that dynamic happening and you've got, a lot of opinions around pricing, that's for sure, a lot of opinions, but no one will actually go, oh yeah, hand up, I did that. This is my decision. I own that decision. So when a price rise is necessary, when it's needed, when you've got your executives that said, we really need to take a price rise, we need to cover our costs, people have to come together and coordinate and start making decisions quickly. And that requires ownership and it requires accountability. And here, that's where the weakness in the process, even if there is a process, starts to show. Okay, let me think of an example for you here. All right, so finance manager might calculate the cost increase at price rise time. But allocating those costs and increases, the COGS, across a large portfolio, I'm thinking here a large complex B2B business from manufacturing and distribution right through to, the end consumer and retail, often have to deal with a very large product portfolio. So allocating those costs increase really isn't easy. I've worked I've worked with many of these types of businesses. I'm thinking of one in particular. It's the B2B complex manufacturing business, where the finance manager had to apply a cost increases across a huge range. It was 350,000 SKUs. But when we reviewed and looked at the data, and we looked at those COGS movements, we saw that some products had increases 3 to 4 times the underlying COGS movement. while others had barely changed at all. Now, no one in particular, he wasn't wrong. He didn't do anything wrong when he did that. It was just a very, very difficult task to allocate costs, even if you don't have that many SKUs. But could you just imagine correctly and accurately allocating costs across thousands, hundreds of thousands of products? It's almost impossible. And this is what we see time and time again. And a lot of finance people are wasting a lot of time trying to do that. It's great effort, but it's not getting the outcome that many businesses need when they're taking a price rise. Okay, so if it's not finance, then who should it be? Well, often when there's some, issues in the price rise process and people are not sure who does what and who's accountable, what we tend to see is sales. Actually, the sales manager, national sales manager, or the sales director, bravely steps in. Of course, makes complete sense in some way because sales are close to the customer. They know the market very well. They understand the relationships. They have often a close relationship with key accounts, and someone needs to start having those sort of difficult pricing discussions. So, in one way, that profile looks good. Yeah, the salesperson should step in and do it. I actually remember one company I worked for, an engineering, B2B engineering parts business. They were taking a price rise and leadership had approved the price percentage. Everything was going well and finance had calculated the prices. Marketing had prepared some beautiful letters and everything looked really good. Everyone was like, yeah, we're ready to go. But once the increase went to market, what we found actually was that sales teams had started adjusting the price increase from the original plan. And they'd done it customer by customer and sometimes at the line item, SKU by SKU. Some increases were reduced, some were delayed, some conversations were completely avoided. Some sales teams just dread having to discuss price with customers, especially an increase. Oh no. So, what we found, it wasn't that they were trying to resist, or they're actually very compliant with the strategy and they knew that it needed to happen. You need to take a price rise, but they were simply almost trying to protect themselves in some way and protect the relationship. It's so difficult, I realized, to keep that relationships and make new business growth is incredibly difficult. And then we've got to have that difficult conversation with a customer say we're going to increase your prices. They sort of almost think, oh, I hope I'm not that's going to jeopardize the relationship. Please, no. What are you going to say? And within, in this particular instance, within a few months, the increase that we discussed, that was discussed around the board table, that was discussed with executives and senior managers, looked extremely different in the market than it did in the plan. And really, I suppose at the end of the day, it did not achieve the margin outcomes that the board and the executive team were expecting. And there was a lot of disappointment. And more than just disappointment, there was a severe financial pressure on the business. I've also seen pricing teams make personal adjustments or judgments on price increases from when the executives said, this is what the price increase, we would like the price increase to be. I've seen the pricing team go in and go, and question that and say, we agree on this portion of the portfolio, but not this portion of the portfolio. And they started spreading those adjustments across the portfolio based on what they believed the product should be positioned at. I'm thinking of a B2B industrial business pricing team that I've worked with. And they would say stuff like, we think these products are premium. We think these products are highly competitive and should have a very large discount. We believe these entry, but not new, but entry, and in between, evolved. So we're going to put this percentage on it, and it actually got quite complex. It was a criteria for sure. It's better than nothing, but the increases would be redistributed across the range based on their internal view, and they'd all agree as a team that they were correct. And on paper, it really did make a lot of sense. But those decisions that were being made were not validated by the market response, elasticities that we were getting. It was validated by their own internal views and emotions about value. And it actually conflicted. There was a big conflict, really, between the view of the pricing team and of the executive team, who did believe that, that the increases that they wanted to occur in the market were being questioned. And look, there's nothing wrong with challenging, opinions on value. It's actually a very healthy way to be, but it should always be backed with evidence. And in this case, in this instance, we saw that the viewpoints of the pricing team were not reflected in the market. Customers did see value in a different way. And sometimes, these two views are quite different, and I highly recommend that, you get that cross-references, different data sources, just to cross-check your viewpoints. And there are processes, customer value discovery processes, research that you can do just to cross-check your data, your opinions, your internal belief systems, because that's the best way to get the outcome that you need. Sometimes it's good to be challenged. There's sort of more of an operational systems data side to increasing prices that I think we should consider as well. Updating price lists across systems within an ERP can be incredibly difficult. Often when I'm looking at systems as part of the diagnostic, I can look at an ERP and think, good Lord, all of these fields are taken, and often they're taken and used in completely the wrong way. They're not used in the way that the software vendors of that particular system would be happy with. It's often a land grab to take fields and use it across different teams. There's often master data issues, and in terms of pricing, there can be many different price lists in that ERP. Some sitting dormant, often hundreds. I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of legacy custom-built price lists for specific deals, as well as your more traditional list price that are used across different markets. And just being left, not maintained. So you can imagine you've got all of that happening in the background, and then you've got to prepare sales teams on communicating and aligning that communications with the actual data communication, the actual price lists, and making sure the data and the messaging are aligned and are matching. Let's just think of it simply. If you say you're going to do a 4% price increase and then your system churns out something like an 8% or doesn't churn out anything, then you're going to have a very difficult conversation. And I suppose this is exactly why sales teams get nervous at price rise. They just think, gosh, I hope everything's gone okay in the back end as well. So, things... You say systems, you go, well, that, everything's embedded in the system, it should just run, it's automated. But it's often not that straightforward at all. So the real issue, when I think about all of these examples and what I'm trying to say, it really isn't the price rise itself. The real issue here comes down to pricing capability. Like simple things like, do you have the data? Do you have the process? If I asked you what the process is, could you explain it to me? Could you write it out simply? Is it a good process? Who runs it? Do you have a team that you can trust to set and manage prices? And the ownership needed, I suppose, to manage pricing decisions properly across the organisation. So here's a question to consider. If your company needed to take a price rise tomorrow, would you be confident that the team, your systems, would be able to implement it well? Because in many companies, that's where the real challenge begins. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Joanna Wells. I'm the founder of Taylor Wells Advisory, and we focus specifically on improving margin through pricing strategy. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Goodbye.